Thursday, the Japanese industrial giant Toshiba revealed that a private consortium has acquired about 80% of its shares, signaling the end of an era as a publicly traded business. The remaining owners will be squeezed out following the $13.5 billion tender offer, and Toshiba shares will be delisted after more than 70 years on the stock exchange, according to the company. Arise business analyst Laurie Laird, she's in London. She joins us now. Laurie, great to have you. Thanks for joining us again. Shall we begin where we left off with the Bank of England?
Yeah, look, we may as well issue our mea culpas. We both thought, I'm dragging you into my circle here. We both thought that the Bank of England was going to raise rates by 25 basis points. And we were in such a minority, but so close. 4 of the 9 members of the Monetary Policy Committee, and that's the group that meets every 6 weeks or so to consider interest rates. 4 of the 9 wanted a rate hike. 5 did not want a rate hike. So a tiny majority. We were almost there, Rojas. We almost got it right. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I do not think this will be the last rate hike. And just a couple of minutes ago, Andrew Bailey did a pool interview with various UK broadcasters, and that's beginning to run now. Unfortunately, we don't have, I can't bring you that at the moment, but he did say, look, we can't celebrate yet. We haven't won the fight against inflation, definitely suggesting that there could be more rate hikes to come. Now, I got to tell you, Rodas, I'm a little bit baffled by this decision. I went through the minutes. I went through them with a fine-tooth comb. And the group, the 5 that wanted to keep rates on hold, said, look, we realize that earnings are rising by a record amount, up 8.1% in the 3 months to July. That's crazy. That outside of the anomalies of COVID, that is a record, and it actually is now above inflation. So they're looking at earnings, but they're saying, we're not seeing, despite record earnings, we are not seeing this earnings growth in other measures of earnings. But this 8.1% I've just described, it's the official number. It comes from the Office for National Statistics. So I don't understand that. And if earnings growth a couple of months ago was a reason to raise rates, now that we have earnings growth at a record, I'm absolutely baffled. And we are seeing evidence, Rodas, that this earnings growth is feeding through into strong consumer spending. We had very strong retail sales in the month of July. We'll get these August numbers tomorrow. Next, which is a very big chain of retailers here in the UK, just a couple of hours ago, upgraded its earnings projection, saying consumer spending is very, very strong, which presumably is linked to earnings growth. So how can that not be inflationary? I am completely baffled. My other question is, what about energy prices? We have seen a 30% rise in crude oil prices since the end of June. Just a couple hours ago, as you mentioned, Russia is saying we're going to cut exports of diesel and petroleum. Russia is the biggest exporter of these downstream products. That will increase the price that people pay to drive, to heat their homes, without a question. Won't only one mention of energy prices in that the minutes of that monetary policy meeting, which ended yesterday, and that was simply in the sense of noting the economic, what had happened to the in the global economy since the last meeting. There was no mention of energy prices in the consideration of interest rates, and I'm baffled by that. If higher energy prices were a reason to raise rates 6 months ago, why not now?
Laurie, excellent breakdown. I'm totally with you. You're speaking truth to power with your analysis. I'm lost as well. I'm totally.
Well, let's hope they're listening.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure they are. They should be listening. Laurie, you quickly touched on Russia. Do you think is this a geopolitical thing? Is it a retaliation for sanctions? Well, what do you think the Russia decision is about?
What I honestly think that this is more of a local thing, more of a domestic issue. There have been very big shortages of diesel and petrol in Russia, partially because they're exporting as much as they can. With the ruble weak, they want to maximize those hard currency earnings by sending this stuff abroad. There have been big shortages, particularly in the agricultural south of Russia, where you need diesel to put into tractors to harvest grains. And I think it's more of a domestic problem than it is a sort of a message to the world. Hard to say. The notice itself was very, very sketchy. This ban comes into force today. We don't know how long it will last. So I think it is much more of a domestic situation than it is international. But with the lack of information on this, we'll have to keep an eye on it.
Thanks, Laurie. I really want to pick your brain on this Toshiba announcement to go private. What do you make of the final heave here?
This is torturous. I feel like we've been covering Toshiba's woes since you were in short pants, Rhoda. This has been going on for over 5 years. We've had Toshiba, a household name, one of the big Japanese conglomerates, one of the pioneers in electronic products. And then it expanded. It got into nuclear power. Nuclear power investments in the U.S. really were part of the undoing of Toshiba. It had to restate its accounts a number of times. And a lot of people think that Toshiba really is an example of poor corporate governance in Japan. And we are seeing some improvements to corporate governance in Japan, and we're starting to see more independent non-Japanese board members on some of these big companies. But Toshiba, I think, really was a cautionary tale of what can happen when you don't have independence on a board. So many problems there. This is quite the end of an era. This will be a very much slimmed down Toshiba. And while their shares have been on and off the exchange because of the problems that Toshiba has had with accounting, this is the last time they are delisted, becoming a private company. It really is historical. I know that's a word we use all the time these days, but in corporate Japan, this is very much a big deal. Corporate Japan has a history of not letting companies go bust. At last, Toshiba has essentially gone bust. It is being bought, and it will be refashioned in some way with the core parts.
Wow, end of an era there. Iconic company there. Laurie, it's central bank day. I guess another central. Turkey, I think on the path to normalization in Turkey. What do you make of their rate hike?
Such a good question, isn't it? We've got another 500 basis points. 5 percentage points. And the analysts think that this is needed. Inflation in Turkey heading toward an annual rate of 60%, may even be higher, particularly with these oil prices that I keep harping on about. That could feed into inflation. Turkey is a very big importer of energy, so that will feed into inflation. But I think the question here, and I think you asked it better than I will, does this mean that policy has normalized? I.e., does this mean that President Erdogan has finally divorced himself from his theory that, as he would say, high interest rates are the mother of all evil? He seems to think that higher interest rates actually cause inflation. As a bit of an unconventional view. But after his re-election, he did appoint some more, let's say, conventional economists to the board of the central bank, and they were a little bit slow to raise rates when they started. We've seen these aggressive moves. So I think with each aggressive move, we will see investors become a little bit more confident in investing in Turkey. And in fact, we have seen net inflows of foreign money into Turkish bonds and into Turkish stocks over the past 2 months.
Thanks, Laurie. All right, Toshiba, that's one icon. Another icon, Rupert Murdoch. What do you make of him stepping down?
This is the craziest story, Rhoda. Honestly, this is the biggest story in the UK. For a couple of hours today, the news was full of the Bank of England not hiking rates, as many of us thought that they might do. That has been out the window, and now all that we are talking about here is Rupert Murdoch. And the funny thing is, we're talking about this story as if we're surprised that a man who's almost 93 is stepping back from the chairmanship of 2 of his companies. But because he is, again, I hate to overuse, we're using the word icon so much here, but he really is an iconic media mogul. I mean, he's almost, almost a caricature. In fact, the television show Succession is meant to be modeled on the Murdoch family. We can't confirm that, but that certainly is the assumption for people who watch that show. He has had a 70-year, here we're looking at him with one of his wives. He's had quite a few of them. That's Jerry Hall. He has had 2 children with her? No children with her. Wait, so 2 with the wife before Jerry Hall. Excuse me there. 6 children in all. So he is stepping back, but he is saying that my companies, in a statement, my companies are in perfect health, as am I. He will remain on the board as chairman emeritus, and his son Lachlan will be taking over the chairmanship of both Fox, which is sort of in charge of live events. Fox News, which is the biggest news channel in the U.S. There are also some sporting events. Then we have News Corp, which has all of the print titles, the Sunday Times, the Sun, which was once the biggest selling newspaper here in the UK. Two separate companies. He was chair of both, and now his son Lachlan will become chair of both. But Rupert Murdoch still very much on the scene, at least according to this statement, assuring us all that he is still healthy and still willing to work.
Laurie, you are a body of wisdom when it comes to the business analysis. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Because
really
I'm almost
appreciate
92.
you. Thank you, Laurie.